Hi, I'm Jeannie.
And I'm Danny.
And we are Beauties and the Podcast.
Welcome back to Beauties and the Podcast. We are so glad you could join us for our second episode. This week we will be diving into a Disney classic, Snow White. Snow White is Disney's first animated movie and the first film to have a soundtrack recording. Walt Disney was 15 when he came up with the idea for Snow White. It made $8 million internationally in 1938. 150 girls auditioned for. She was signed a contract stating she couldn't act or sing in any other movies or radio programs. The reasoning? Disney didn't want anything ruining Snow White's image. So Adriana made $970 for her role and never acted again. Snow White falls into the damsels in distress time period of Disney, where a 14-year-old princess is saved by a prince and lives happily ever after. So now that we have some basic, let's dive into a more detailed movie breakdown.
Okay, for the movie breakdown, at the very beginning, we see a thank you from Walt to his production staff, thanking them for their loyalty and creative endeavor to make the production possible. This is also one of only 2 Walt Disney films to say that this is a Walt Disney presentation instead of just Walt Disney Presents. The only other one would be Fantasia. So after the credits, this is one of the movies where the credits, of course, were still at the beginning of films. We see this beautiful big white book with some gold embellishment on it. The Seven Dwarfs are at the very bottom of the book. It opens up and we start with a couple of pages that just read a little bit about the beginning of the tale and the Princess of Snow White with her very wicked stepmother, who is the queen, that feared that Snow White's beauty would surpass her own. So what the queen did was she made Snow White into her little maid and made her pretty much just clean the entire castle grounds. The queen had this magic mirror that every day she would say, "Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And every day the mirror would say, "You are the fairest one of all." So one day the queen asked her magic mirror on the wall, who's the first one of all? And for once, he finally does not say it is her. He said, "It is the one with lips red as the rose, hair black as ebony, and skin white as snow." And she puts that together and it's Snow White. So then we go outside and there's Snow White scrubbing the steps. There's birds all around her, surrounding her. And she gets up to go to a well to get some more water. And that's where we see the first song to play is "I'm Wishing," where she's wishing for a prince to come take her away. And she's singing it into the well. As she's singing, a prince just so happens to be walking by on his horse.
Well, yeah, why not?
And as he hears this and is like, "Oh, I'm going to go say hello and join her." So he does. And he joins her and scares her. And she runs and goes inside, locks the door. And he's just like, "What's going on?" Like,
She acts like a little rabbit.
yeah, like, "You ran away. Why'd you run away? I'm a handsome prince."
What?
So
I'm not a random man coming up to see you that you don't know and you're just going to just keep singing with me?
Exactly.
Don't worry about it. You'll fall in love with me. I'll save you later.
So he finishes the song and she kind of goes out of a window and she smiles at him and eventually closes the drapes. As this is happening, the queen sees that this prince is, has come, introduced himself to the princess, which she cannot have. So she orders a huntsman to take Snow far into the woods, let her pick some, wildflowers and act like it's a beautiful day. And then she wants him to kill her. And as proof, that he killed her, bring her heart back to her in this box. As proof that he killed her, bring her heart back to her in this box. So the huntsman, he takes her. They're in like this little, the outskirt of a little forest wooded area, and she's picking some flowers, and she hears this little bird kind of just tweet away, and he's a baby, and she understood what this little bird tweeted. She looks at him, she's like, oh, you must be lost. You have no parents. Oh, look, there's your parents. And she's like, oh, yeah, go fly. You can fly. Just go. So the little bird goes. And she sees the shadow of the huntsman. He's got a dagger in his hand. She turns around, screams. He tries to kill her, but then he can't. He can't kill her. So he tells her of his orders from the queen to kill her, and he tells her to run far away and don't come back. So she runs. And as she runs into the woods, she has no clue where she is. We can see all these trees and owls and everything that magically turn into some very scary creatures for her. She's
very dark.
It is.
It goes super like.
So here is the British Film Censors, which is currently the British Board of Film Classification. They gave this film an A certificate upon the original release, which resulted in nationwide controversy due to how frightening this whole scene was, especially for little kids.
Oh, yeah.
So, but they, most local authorities overrode the censor decision and gave the film a U certificate. So during the scene, we have owls and bats, and we see some twigs that magically will grab her, even though her dress is just simply caught on twigs. It turns into hands that are pulling her back. We see logs that look like alligators that are scaring her. The wind decides to chase her, and it's a lot for her. So she just, typically what the princesses do is they fall to the ground and they just cry.
Damsel in distress.
Yes. All the little woodland creatures, they come out. So we see some bunnies, some chipmunks. All the little woodland creatures, they come out. So we see some bunnies, some chipmunks, squirrels, deer, birds, raccoons, and one little turtle. So then they scare her. She apologizes that she frightened them because they scared her. And then with a smile and a song plays. She feels a lot better after that song plays. And so she needs a place to go. She can't stay. The animals just know of a little cottage that she can live in. And they take her to this cottage, and she peeks through a window, and she sees that it's empty, and she knocks on the door. Obviously it is empty, so there's no answer. And she notices all these little chairs, and she's like, oh, there must be 7 little children here. And the whole place is a mess. It's a disaster. So eventually, after looking around, she's like, well, maybe these children have no mother. So she decides that she is going to clean up and tidy up their little cottage, which, why you would think 7 little children are allowed to live by themselves.
The woman talks to birds, Jeannie.
This is true.
She talks to birds.
So then Whistle While You Work plays, which I love this song.
Mm-hmm.
Then Whistle While You Work plays, which I love this song.
Mm-hmm.
So she is sweeping. She's got everybody kind of helping out.
Animals doing work.
Yep, you got
So cute.
little deer licking plates, trying to clean them, and she corrects that. The chipmunks are sweeping dirt under the rug. She corrects that.
Or into the mouse hole.
The mouse corrected that. Doing laundry outside because cleaning things in little puddles. So then we break away from the cottage. We are at a diamond mine where we meet the mining diamonds.
We don't know where the diamonds end up.
Nope. So they're on their way home. We see them lock up this, but they put the key right next to the door. So if I just have to take the key that's right next to, we see them marching home. They notice that there is something going on with the house. By this point, Snow White decided that she needed a nap, so she went upstairs, seeing all these little dwarf beds with all their names carved in all these little beds, and she takes a nap. So for the dwarves, she sees all these names, which we know as Doc, Happy, Sneezy, Dopey, Grumpy, Bashful, and Sleepy. However, some other weird names are Biggie, Blabby, Deefy. Not entirely sure what his thing would be. Dirty, Gabby, Gaspy, Gloomy, Hoppy, Jumpy is one name. Hotsy, Jaunty, Nifty, Dirty, Gabby, Gaspy, Gloomy, Hoppy, Jumpy is one name. Hotsy, Jaunty, Nifty, and Shifty.
We also had Duffy.
We did have Duffy.
And there's a release of artwork of some of the dwarves, their first sketches of the dwarves, and you can see that we can put that as a link in the description. But they have images of Baldy and of Daffy, which are quite interesting. And then they also have what we know as Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Dopey, and Doc. But they do look a little bit different from what we know in the movie. But it is quite interesting. And they made great choices to not have those names, because some of those names are quite offensive to so many people.
So, as the dwarves are... actually, no. So, as we know, these names are... They really only came from the Disney version, is where we see them. The original tale, they didn't have names.
No, they did not.
So Walt Disney gave them names, kind of gave them more of a...
personality, something to connect to.
Yep.
Something we can like about the characters.
Yep. So we go back. They are approaching their house. They see that there's a light on. There's smoke coming from their chimney, which is weird because nobody's supposed to be in their house. And this is where we've got Grumpy that is like, listen, my corns hurt, and this means trouble.
TMI, dude. TMI. Don't need to know about your corns.
So when we see them marching home, we see Sleepy and Dopey are the only two that carry their axes on their right shoulder, where everybody else carries them on their left. So I don't know if that signifies that they are left or right.
Which two?
So Sleepy and Dopey
Huh.
carry them on their right shoulder on their way when they're marching across the bridge.
Well, Sleepy is not always with it because he's
That is true.
sleepy, and Dopey is not always with it.
He's
because
never with it.
Dopey. So maybe it's like just showing the two characters that aren't all there.
That
where
could
everybody
be.
else is in a line and strict and know what the routine is, and they just don't follow suit. I don't know. Or they could be left-handed, right-handed.
That could be. But then all of a sudden we see Dopey carrying a red lantern when they come towards their home, which I don't know if they have this red lantern stashed somewhere, but all of a sudden he's got a red lantern in his hand as they're approaching home. Now, Dopey initially was supposed to be a talking dwarf, but there was nobody to voice him.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that's the primary reason why he's a mute, because they could not find a good voice for him. Mel Blanc was considered for the voice of Dopey, but was not cast. We have Pinto Colvig, who voiced Sleepy and Grumpy, and was also the voice of Goofy. And comedian Joe Twerp was considered for the role of Doc, but that actually went to Roy Atwell. But Twerp performed Doc on the radio series, which I didn't know that this made it on the radio. And then Sterling Holloway, who later appeared in more Disney films, was considered the role for Sleepy, but did not get it.
Well, I think with Dopey not having his own voice, I think it fits his character more because he comes off as not...
He's childlike.
Yeah, he's childlike. He might not be as, versed in education.
Yeah.
So I think it fits him. Plus, it kind of gives him like a cute factor because he just is just like a little doughy little ball of cute.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it's a good fit. Like, it didn't take anything away that he didn't have a voice. If anything, it added to it.
Mm-hmm. So when Snow went to go take her nap, we seen the animals all go up the stairs, with the exception of the turtle. It took him a little bit
Poor turtle.
to get up the stairs. And when he finally made it upstairs is when the dwarves approached and woke up all the animals that were upstairs. They rushed downstairs, and this poor little turtle just falls right back to the bottom of the stairs, and poor little guy's like, I have no clue what just happened. So all the animals run outside. The dwarves are very concerned with what's going on inside their house, and they're very cautious when they walk inside and they see everything is clean. They also notice that there is something brewing, which Grumpy convinces everyone that it's a witch's brew and that there's a witch somewhere.
He's very skeptical.
He is.
The whole vibe is kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where someone's in your house and you don't know what's going on, and somebody broke my chair and sat in this bed or whatever.
So they're investigating. As they're investigating, there's 3 little bluebirds, which is the family of bluebirds that Snow gives the little bird back to when he lost his parents. They're inside the cottage still, and they decide to take this opportunity to mess with the dwarves. So they peck at the ceiling boards and make some other weird noises, and it scares the crap out of the dwarves. They run outside and think it's best to send Dopey in and upstairs to see what is up there, what they're dealing with.
He's the most gullible. He'll actually do it. He doesn't have any common sense not to.
And he does. So he goes upstairs, and all of a sudden Snow is stretching under a sheet. He runs downstairs because he's frightened, runs into the dwarves outside waiting to hear back from Dopey on what is up there. And he's just making all these gestures, and they're like, oh, it's a monster. What is the monster doing? And he gestures that it's sleeping. So they all go back. They have their pickaxes. And they're like, we're going to kill it. So they go upstairs. They pull this sheet off of her, and they're like, oh, it's a girl. She wakes up and notices these guys, kind of gets a little startled, and is like, well, how do you do? Well, Grumpy's line is, how do you do what? She's like, well, how do you do? So she introduces herself to them, and then she guesses at what dwarf is who. Gets that correct just right off the bat, between Sneezy trying not to sneeze, Sleepy yawning, Grumpy just looks grumpy, Happy's extremely happy, and so on. So she tells them of what the evil queen has done, and that, she needs a place to stay, and that she will sew and keep house and cook, and they let her stay. Grumpy is still very, very skeptical, does not like this idea at all. But everybody was like, listen, she's staying. So she runs downstairs because the soup is boiling. The dwarves are watching her and they're like, we smell soup. Let's go eat. And she's like, no, it's not done yet. While it's finishing up.
Y'all nasty. Your house was nasty. I bet your hands are nasty.
Yeah.
Go wash.
Go wash. When was the last time you washed? And they're just like, we washed recently.
I love how Doc was like, he's like the leader, obviously, with
Yeah.
that whole role. And he's just like, we washed. And he's like, you could see him thinking like so hard of what could be an answer that could possibly get them out of washing their hands.
What is acceptable?
Recently.
Oh, recently. So then she looks at their hands and she's like, you boys are disgusting.
Get out.
Go clean. So they go to the this big tub filled with water and they're forced to wash their hands.
What is that called? There's a water trough. It's a water trough.
So I love this song. It's got a horrible name. It's called Bloodaludalum-Dum.
Dumb name. No one knows that name.
Exactly. But I love it. So everybody's washing except for Grumpy. Grumpy is sitting on a crate with a piece of grass in his hand, just watching all this go on. So this initially, the dwarves were supposed to like eat soap. In the original,
like they swore, and so they needed soap in their mouth.
It was one of the main sequences that was cut was the dwarves were eating soap.
Good, because that's a dumb scene.
Yeah. And the guy that nearly quit because of this, the only reason he stayed was because Walt convinced him and gave him the character of Jiminy Cricket for Pinocchio.
Oh, buy your way out.
Yeah, exactly. So for this scene, we also see Dopey. So they get Grumpy. They all just kind of jump on him, grab him, take him to the trough. Doc tells Dopey to get the soap, which he accidentally swallows and then hiccups bubbles.
So special.
And as we're watching Dopey, because I love Dopey. Dopey he's like his own little.
He's a little doughy cute pile of cuteness.
The animator added, when you see Dopey just walking normally, every now and then you'll see him hitch his step. Mm-hmm. And Walt loved it so much that he had it added in more places.
Oh, I love that.
Because he loved it. It was a cute little add-on for Dopey.
It gives him character.
Yeah. So, and one of the first times, he might do it as they're walking over the bridge on the way home, but he definitely does it walking out to the soap trough.
Yes, he does.
So they grab Grumpy. Dopey swallows the soap. He's hiccuping bubbles. Doesn't know how to make it stop. As they are doing all of this, we are back at the castle. Back at the castle, the queen is asking her mirror, listen, I should be the fairest one, right? And
because, Snow White's dead.
Yeah.
The huntsman brings back
he brought
heart
yeah.
in a box. So
makes
that shows
sense.
her that Snow White is definitely no longer with us. She is which is smart of the hunter.
Yeah. So where he got a pig, who knows? But he got a pig, gave the queen pig's heart, and the queen is furious. We see her, she's storming out. She's going to this basement. She's got all of these books and a bird, which apparently is a raven. I still think it's a crow.
I agree. We'll get with that later,
But so she's got all these books of astrology, black arts, alchemy, witchcraft, black magic, disguises, sorcery, and poisons.
Which is crazy, because if she's just an evil queen, why does she got all this stuff? It wasn't that she was a witch.
Right. So she chooses disguises, of all books, and decides to transform herself into an old hag, which Lucille Laverne was the voice of the evil queen. And she was told by all the animators that she needed a different voice for the old hag. She needed one that's raspy, older.
I think that's an accurate statement to make it look the transformation complete.
So she left the recording booth, took her false teeth out,
Ew.
and came back
Ew.
with an old hag's voice.
I mean, good for her for being innovative and flexible, but gross.
Yeah, they were very stunned. They didn't know what she did because she just stepped out and then walked back a few minutes later with
What a
this
lady.
whole new voice. And
How
they're
did
like,
they not
well,
see the teeth in her mouth?
because typically I think everybody's behind you.
Oh, man.
So it's the same voice for the queen and the old hag. It's the same person.
Same person, just she didn't have her teeth in.
Yeah.
Wow.
Phenomenal.
That is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Gross, but cool.
So she turns one page. We don't see her grab a new book, which is so confusing because she grabbed disguises.
And now she's going to be learning about a poison apple. So,
Yeah.
disguising an apple,
That could be.
just dressing it up in a costume to make it a poison apple. I don't know. But you could be disguising an apple to make it look like a real apple, but it's really a poison apple.
We'll come back to this book.
Okay.
So as she finds this recipe for a poison apple, the movie jumps back to the cottage, and everybody's having fun. The silly song plays, and we see Happy sing, we see Bashful sing. He's chasing cats up trees and making fun of them. We have Dopey on the drums. Sleepy is playing this clarinet. Sneezy is playing the lute. And we see Happy singing. Bashful sings after Happy. He, chased a cat up a tree, made fun of him. We have Dopey playing drums. Sleepy playing the clarinet. Sneezy is playing the lute. Bashful is on a concertina. Grumpy is on the organ. Doc is playing a bass, and Happy just kind of bounces back and forth between the drums and the bass. They're all having fun, dancing. Dopey decides it's a great idea to climb on top of Sneezy to dance with Snow White because he's in love with Snow White. He's so cute.
To be tall.
Yep. So they're dancing. Sneezy all of a sudden does what Sneezy does best and sneezes, and Dopey falls off, and everything just kind of stops, and everyone's laughing. So during that whole sequence, there was a dancer who, her name was Marge Champion. Her movements was kind of rotoscoped and used for a guide for Snow White when Snow White was dancing. We hear Snow telling a story because the dwarves tell her it's her turn to sing a song. So she's telling a story about when the prince met her when she was cleaning the stairs at the Queen's Castle, and she starts singing "Someday My Prince Will Come," which this song was planned from the beginning. Walt had this idea from the very beginning for this song. So it's one of the original things that maintained with the movie. It's bedtime. They let Snow go have the whole upstairs and all the beds to herself. And there's only one pillow, and we see Dopey just kind of sneak away to go take this pillow. And as soon as Snow closes the door upstairs, they all act like heathen. So after they tear up the pillow, they all just kind of find a spot to go to sleep for the night. We have Grumpy sleeping in a pot. Bashful is in a drawer. Happy is sleeping in a cupboard with all the dishes. Doc is in the sink. Sneezy is using Dopey's butt as a pillow, and they're on the bench. And Sleepy is in the corner, and there's the little fly that has been kind of buzzing around that sleeps on his nose.
Do you think they gave Snow White the room as gentlemen so she'd have her privacy? Because I don't think she would take up 7 of their beds.
No. And we seen earlier that she only takes up 3 or 4.
Right, so
I think they were being a gentleman, just letting her have her own room.
y'all can't wash your hands. You got a messy old house, but you're nice. And
So we're back at the castle. We see the old hag, which is the queen. She's making her poison apple. She got the recipe from the Disguises book because we didn't see her grab a different book. So the poison apple antidote is also in this book. So there's also antidotes in this book for disguises. Because she flips all the pages from the poison apple, flips back a couple, and that's when she sees the antidote is love's first kiss, which will never happen because she'll be buried alive.
so you're saying that in the first book, it does have the apple, poison apple in it?
I am saying that
So there's like a book for disguises and a book for antidotes?
it's confusing that a poison apple page with an antidote page would be in a book of disguises. And they should have added her choosing a new book.
They should have disguises in one and then poisons in another.
Yeah, because she
With
has
the antidotes.
a book on poisons.
Right.
We just
Why-
don't see her taking it.
And why?
All we see is her taking one book, opening it up, which was the disguises, brew herself a drink to make her a hag, turn one page for the poison apple, flip a couple more pages.
So do you think it was a mistake? Like they made a mistake and left it out? Do you think they purposely left it out? Because I feel if they're so detailed that they want her to change her voice from a cackling old witch to the evil queen,
Yeah.
you'd think they'd care about details of a 2 different book.
Especially when
poison/disguise.
Yes, especially when she has a book on poison. Makes no sense to me.
Did you actually look any of that up yet?
I did not look it up, but I did. I just made a note of it because it's something that bothered me since I was little. Like, you have all these books. Moving on, she knows in her thinking, she knows that the poison apple antidote, which is love's first kiss, is not going to work because Snow's going to be presumed dead, buried alive.
She thinks people are dumb and not going to realize anything else by it.
Yeah. So, works out for her. So, she puts the apple into this basket with all these green and yellow apples. The poison apple is the only bright red one. She takes the basket, starts walking, and looks at a skeleton, asks it if it's thirsty, kicks a bucket towards it, and enters a boat. So she is on a boat. Who knows where that takes her. From boat, she then walks on foot, and all of a sudden it's morning. So she has walked all night and is now near the vicinity of the cottage, making her way there. It is day, And we are at the cottage. The dwarves are leaving for work. As they are leaving, Snow White gives each of them one kiss on the forehead. Dopey comes back after his first kiss. He jumps through the window and wants another one. After his second one, he jumps through the window again, gets a third kiss, and Snow's like, listen, no, we're just go on. Go on. Grumpy, like, gets his forehead all ship-shop into shape for a kiss on his forehead, even though he's grumpy. And he's going to act like he doesn't like Snow.
Mm-hmm.
Goes outside and says, listen, don't let anyone in. And Snow's like, oh, you care. Gives him a kiss. He walks away, runs into a tree because now he's all embarrassed.
Did you know that Happy wasn't seen in any of the scene of where they're getting kissed?
I did not realize that.
He is left out of it.
Oh, poor Happy. I wonder if that makes him not so happy. So, on the old hag's way to the cottage, we see her passing these two vultures, and they follow her.
Mm-hmm.
So they follow her all the way to the cottage. We see Snow White in the cottage. She's making a gooseberry pie for Grumpy. She even kind of takes the extra dough from the crust and writes out Grumpy on the very top of the top crust of the pie. She looks up and there's the old hag with the basket of apples. The animals are all outside and they see this and they're like, something's not right. We need to do something because this lady is not what she looks like. Like, this is the queen. We know it's the queen. So the animals go running for the dwarves to go get them to come back to help Snow. And as they're doing this, they try and distract the old hag and get her to leave. Doesn't work. Snow is like, listen, be nice to this old lady. We don't know her. The old lady,
So naive.
fakes a heart problem. Like, oh, my heart. So Snow White, even though she was just told not to let anybody in, lets her in. Gives her some water and is very hospitable. She's very young, very naive. Doesn't know the world yet. So we see all the animals running. The poor turtle is trying his best. He's a part of this. Poor turtle. He reminds me of Dopey. He's very slow in that sense.
Or sleepy.
Or sleepy. So the old hag is like, here, take this apple. It's a magic wishing apple, which Snow is all about wishing for things. She was at the wishing well wishing for her prince. She sang the song, when her prince is going to come. She's all about it. And the movie flip-flops back and forth between the cottage and the animals going for help. The animals get to the mine just as the dwarves were getting there, and the animals are all over the dwarves trying to get them to go back home. And it takes, I believe it was Sleepy that was like, oh, maybe it's the old witch doing something. And then Doc is like, that's it. That's why the animals are doing this. That's why they've come to get us. So they all hop on the backs of deer, and the deer just take them back to the cottage. And we see Snow White wishing for her prince to take her away. She takes a bite of the apple and falls. So it starts raining. As it's starting to rain, the hag exits the cottage just as the dwarves re-enter their property. And as the witch runs, the dwarves chase after her. She heads up this big giant hill. The vultures are following her. And if you actually look, like, the vultures aren't chasing. They're not staying behind for Snow White. They're not chasing the dwarves. They're chasing the hag.
Mm-hmm.
So she's going up this mountain. It is thunderstorming, heavy rain, and it's a bad storm. The hag gets a stick and she is trying to push this boulder that is just kind of resting on a couple other little rocks. She's trying to push it down to crush the dwarves. Lightning just so happens to strike where she is standing and she falls to her death. And that is when we see the two vultures kind of float downward and they start circling around her. So this is where, like in the original fairy tale, the queen was forced to dance in burning metal shoes.
Yep, we're going to get to that.
Okay. So it's raining. It's not, there's no thunder or lightning no longer. And they kind of have Snow White sprawled on a bed, and everybody is just, there's tears flowing down everybody's eyes, the deer and the animals included. It's a very somber moment because they think that she died. So we see...
Which is what the evil queen predicted, that everyone would just assume she was dead.
Exactly. And that she would be buried alive. So it goes back to the main original book that was telling us the beginning of the story, that we see the seasons change. So we see kind of summer turning into fall, and fall turning into winter, winter turning back into spring. And through this, it reads that they didn't want to bury her. She was so beautiful. They could not bear themselves to bury her. So they made her a glass coffin for her, which this was a scene that was also cut out. I don't think it was animated.
Oh, like
it was planned to, it was drawn up, it was made, but it never made it to animation.
Got it.
So we see all the animals and the dwarves, they pay their respects. They have stayed vigilant on this glass coffin with her presumed dead corpse for 3 seasons now, so almost a year. And then all of a sudden the prince comes, and the prince has heard of this maiden who is in a glass coffin. So he comes and he raises the lid on this coffin, which, if the dwarves never left because they stayed vigilant, how did the prince know of a maiden in a glass coffin?
Well, I mean, word gets around, first of all. Second of all, he was around Snow White with the animals. Maybe he can also talk to animals. Maybe some of the animals went and passed the word on. A little birdie told him, if you know.
Oh, that darn little bluebird.
Darn little bluebird.
So he opens up the coffin lid and he kisses her. And she starts to wake up, and as she's waking up, everyone kind of looks up and sees her waking up. And the prince picks her up, carries her to his horse, sets her on the horse, and then picks up all the little dwarves so that she can give a kiss to each of the dwarves' foreheads. And he just kind of takes her away and walks back to the castle, which it always confused me why they stopped and the castle was in the clouds. But that's just me. Also, in that scene where he's picking her up, there is a mistake, as the cells that they were animating didn't line up, so a lot of things will jump and skip.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that noticeable if you're not thinking about it, but if you're carefully watching for it, you can kind of see.
There's some of that when they're running with the deer, too.
Okay.
They keep flip-flopping the different characters. You can see them flip-flopping. Yep. Same with earlier on, the deer at one point was gray. Like when the animals were in the house and then going back outside the house and into the house. Deer goes from being gray to brown to gray to brown a couple times, too. So little tricks and things that they skipped up.
Yep. Roy Disney, Walt's brother, declared to, quote unquote, let the prince shimmy until 1993, which was when, in the 1993 remake, was when, or the remastered edition, they kind of corrected it and restored the film. So they walk to a hill. You can see in the sky that there's a beautiful castle. The book closes with they lived happily ever after, and that's the end of the movie.
Damsel in distress got rescued by her prince.
Yep, which is exactly
Lived happily ever after.
And it's what she wished for the entire time. So this was the first of many Disney films to premiere at New York City's Radio City Music Hall. At the end of the film's initial engagement there, the velvet seat upholstery and everything had to be replaced because there were so many young children.
Aww. Kicking their little feetsies on the chairs.
Yep. There were also... Okay, so the children at that premiere were very frightened, as we discussed, about the forest scene where she is running.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying because if you think of like
Also, the children at that premiere were very frightened, as we discussed, about the forest scene where she is running.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying because if you think of like a child sleeping in their bed, what do they normally, like, they see objects and shadows turning in their head, their imagination getting away with them. So that was very relatable.
Yeah.
To them.
So at the premiere, they wet themselves because they were scared.
Ew. This movie has so much grossness in it. No one ever even knew. Teeth, corns.
Yeah.
Peeing children.
This movie only had, which I mean, this is an interesting fact, but then again, I'm like, it's kind of not. There's only 11 human characters in the film. So there's the Seven Dwarfs, the Queen, Snow White, the Prince, and the Huntsman, which the Prince's role is very minor.
It is. It's so funny that he's the hero and rescues her, but he barely. We aren't related. Like, we have no relationship with him.
No,
we know nothing about him.
He has no name.
He doesn't have a name. He doesn't have a kingdom.
Correct.
Nothing.
He is.
He sings. He's kind of a creep.
Yeah.
He likes kissing dead things.
Yeah.
Boom. Happily ever after.
So he is, I think he's actually the only prince in the entire Disney franchise that we know nothing about.
And I have a theory about this. So, because this was Walt Disney's first film, because he thought about this when he was 15 years old, and he was very specific about who was going to voice her. No one else was going to use that voice from now on. A few other things that we're going to get to about the artwork. He was very focused on only Snow White.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the development of her to make her perfect.
Yeah.
And
there was a lot of production for this movie. So he employed 32 animators, 102 assistants, 167 in-betweeners, 20 layout artists, 25 artists doing watercolor backgrounds, 65 effects animators, and 158 female inkers and painters. And 2 million illustrations were made using 1,500 shades of different paint.
That's awesome.
There were 25 songs that were originally written for this movie, but they only used 8 of them. So a woman named Deanna Durbin was, she originally auditioned for the voice of Snow White, but Walt did not choose her because her voice, in his opinion, was too mature for Snow White. This was the first film to have a soundtrack recording.
Mm-hmm.
So because Walt Disney Pictures, they didn't have their own music publishing company when this was originally animated, they kind of outsourced all the rights of the music and all the songs to be published, which are still controlled by, it's called the Bourne Company. And later on, when they finally got music, like they were able to publish their own music and everything, and a recording studio, they had to kind of purchase back their rights since they had sold their rights before, so they had to reacquire some of their soundtrack. There are $5 a gag policy, which that was to pretty much just keep everybody like not being bored, because this film took, I believe, 2 years at least to make, so everybody was kind of getting bored and kind of had to keep and then originally it was kind of the length of a short film, and then they extended it to a full length. Okay, so there were some scenes that were, they planned a lot of scenes, as we kind of brought up, but they never fully animated them, like the dwarves making her glass coffin and some various others. So there's also a scene where the queen held the prince in a dungeon, and she used her magic to make various skeletons, like we seen the one that she was kicking the bucket at. She made some skeletons dance for the prince's amusement. That's not frightening at all.
No, it's super creepy. So I'm guessing the prince showed up because he had seen Snow White at that castle.
Yeah.
He was coming back to be like, hey, remember me? And she was captured. The queen captured him.
Yeah.
Oh.
Similar to Prince Philip in Maleficent.
That's exactly what I was thinking
Yeah.
too. And I mean, it's not a scene that we need for the story to continue, but it would kind of been interesting just to have another scene with the prince in it on his own, just to learn more about him, and like personality-wise. But you know,
a lot of the songs that were thought of were put into production; they just weren't used. So there were songs like "Music in Your Soup," which I can only imagine takes place during...
Well, she's making their soup.
Something like that. There was one that says, "You're Never Too Old to Be Young," which that was a Dwarves feature. So those were never used. They were convinced that this movie was going to fail. So they call it Walt Disney's Folly. Because
the Hollywood film industry thought it was going to fail?
Yep.
Got it.
Yep, they thought this movie was not, I guess, the best movie out there. It was not going to make any money.
Wrong.
He did.
And it was the beginning of the end. This was his first movie, and now look at all the movies he has.
Oh, yeah. There was, this is one of my favorite facts. This one won an Academy Award, which was specially made to be a big Academy Award with 7 little Academy Awards mounted to it to make Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
That's awesome.
It's adorable. I seen a photo of it, and let's get into the Grimm brothers.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. All right, Grimm's brother version, 1812, okay? And we start off with Snow White's mom, which in the Disney version we have no knowledge of. And she is sewing, and she really wants a daughter that is white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as wood. And mom dies right after giving birth from Snow White. Then her dad remarries the queen, the evil queen that we know. And pretty much the similarity of she talks to the mirror, she asks if she's the fairest in the land. The mirror says no, it's Snow White. She sends the hunter after Snow White to kill her. But unlike the Disney one where it's just bring back her heart, she wants him to bring back Snow White's lungs and liver to prove her dead but also to eat, because when she eats it, she then becomes young. So a little more twisted in that aspect.
Yummy.
Disgusting. So he takes her out in the woods. Same premise. He lets her go. He kills an animal. He brings back the liver and the lungs. The evil queen eats it, thinks that it's Snow White. All goes on. Snow White scares the animals. The animals are like, it's okay, whatever, scares her back. She keeps running until she finds the dwarf's house. Now, the house is not dirty in this version. It in fact says it is so neat and clean that no one could say otherwise. And she sees the tablecloth with the white tablecloth linen, and she sees 7 little plates, and each plate has a spoon, and there's 7 knives and forks and 7 mugs. And she goes on in. She sees the 7 little beds, all in a row, covered with their little sheets. She is starving, so she takes some vegetables and some bread, and she eats her little dinner, drinks some wine, and then becomes tired, so she lays down in their beds. This is so much like Goldilocks in this next part. It's hilarious. So one is too long, one is too short, until finally the 7th one is just right. So she tries them all out, lays in the last one, and she falls asleep. After it gets dark, the dwarves return home, and they've been digging in the mountains as well, but instead of digging up diamonds, they were digging up ore. And so they come home and they notice that someone has been there. The first one says, "Who's been sitting in my chair?" I'm not kidding you, people. Wow. This is literally Goldilocks. The second one, "Who's been eating from my plate?" The third one, "Who's been eating my bread?" The fourth one, "Who's been eating my vegetables?" Who's been sticking with my fork? Who has been cutting with my knife? Who has been drinking from my mug? The first one then sees that there's a little imprint in his bed. Who slept in my bed? It is like verbatim, sounds like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, where they run down who's sleeping and who's sitting and who's eating and all that. And then they find out there's someone lying in mine. They don't wake her, though. They see her, they let her sleep because she is so beautiful. And so they let her sleep all night long. And she wakes up the next morning and introduces herself. And they go on their way of living together for a short time. Now let's fast forward to where the queen finds out that Snow White is no longer dead. She goes down to make her poison, but she is not making a poison disguise the way that we know it. She makes a poison comb. So she makes a poison comb, and as soon as she combs her hair, then she becomes the peddler woman.
Oh.
She then goes to the little cottage where she finds Snow White. The 7 dwarves are gone away working. And she tries to sell Snow White a lace bodice. And she convinced her to try it on. As soon as she tries it on, she pulls it super tight until Snow White stops breathing and she passes out on the ground. She leaves her on the ground to die because she can't get any oxygen and goes back to her castle. The dwarves come home and they find her dead, what they think is she is dead, and they end up cutting the lace off, and magically she starts breathing again. Next day, the queen looks in the mirror, asks, who's the fairest, finds out Snow White's not dead again. So she doesn't go back as her original peddler self. She makes a new poison comb.
Oh, boy.
Makes herself a new peddler witch costume. So she looks different than the one from before. And she goes back to the cottage. She tries to sell Snow White a poison comb of her own, and she convinces her to try to comb her hair. So she starts combing Snow White's hair, and Snow White, the comb touches her hair, becomes poison and passes out and looks like she's dead. The queen leaves, the dwarves come find her. all they have to do is remove the comb and she comes back to life. The comb was stuck in her hair. If they remove the comb, she comes back to life. Magic. Queen, third day, finds out, nope, still not dead. So she makes herself, I believe, it doesn't state this, but I would imagine so, a new peddler costume.
Yep. Can't use the same disguise twice.
Gotta fool her. Gotta fool Snow White. Comes back. This time she has the poison apple.
Oh.
And tries to sell Snow White the poison apple. But Snow White is hesitant. She was like, the past 2 days somebody's tried to kill me when they sold me stuff. The dwarves told me not to let anybody in. The queen says, oh, if you're worried about being poisoned, don't worry. We'll cut the apple in half and I'll eat some so you'll have no worries that there's any poison. Well, the apple, how the queen made it, made the red part poison, but the white part not. So the queen eats the white part of the apple. So imagine like she probably cut it in half and then ate the flesh, or like the white part of it, the flesh, from that face. Snow White ate it from the skin red face. Soon as she eats the red skin, you guessed it, she died. Queen leaves, dwarves come back. She's dead. There's nothing they can do. They can't take a comb out of her head.
Yep.
They can't cut her lace. So they make a coffin and they display it in the woods. This is very similar to the Disney version.
Mm-hmm.
They can't bring it to themselves to bury her. She's too beautiful. And so it stays in the woods. The prince comes and he sees the coffin with Snow White in it. He's mesmerized by her beauty and he says, I want to buy that coffin. I want that coffin with that Snow White in it. They were hesitant to do it, but he was really determined. So they decided, okay, we'll give it to you. They go to move the coffin. A couple dwarfs trip, which jostles the coffin, dislodges the apple from her throat, and she wakes up. So the prince does not kiss her to wake her up. The apple comes unlodged, and now she's awake. She wakes up. The prince marries her. They live happily ever after. Queen comes to their wedding.
Oh, good grief.
To see this whole shindig, to believe, what? Snow White's alive? She was for sure dead. She's been dead for a while now. Comes to the wedding, and when they see her, they make her put on a pair of red hot iron shoes that you mentioned before and dance until she dies. And that is the version of the Grimm brothers. A little dark, but a little interesting, and to me hilarious because it's just so repetitive.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't necessary that she came back 3 times to sell her something.
Yeah. Walt did us a favor.
Yeah, so all those scenes that Walt, cut out, thank you, sir, because holy moly.
Yeah.
Insane. So, like you mentioned before, there's a lot of work that got into this movie. Mm-hmm. There was actually like 750 artists that worked on the Snow White movie, completed more than 2 million sketches, and the film, like you said, included 250,000 drawings. When they first started making Snow White, though, the artists were the same artists that made Betty Boop.
Okay.
And when Disney came to see their sketches, he was shocked. And if we have an image, we'll put it up so you guys can see it. She looks very much like Betty Boop. But Disney was shocked. He didn't like her red lips. He didn't like her long lashes. He felt that she had a sexy glimpse of her ankle going on and that she was just too sexy. And his vision of Snow White was an innocent damsel in distress, needed to be simple and beautiful. So he stopped production. He made them redo all of it. He got new artists. They recreated what Snow White looked like and even used some of their own rouge to apply to her cheeks. They used different paints and things to make it look more natural because that's what he wanted. He wanted more of a natural, innocent character and not a sexy character. We have heard a lot about the birds in this movie. Mm-hmm. And so when I was watching this movie, it stood out to me. And I really wanted to notice what kind of birds and what we would see them as symbolizing. So birds in general are freedom and independence, and also something of between life and death, which for this movie, Snow White was trying to be free of the queen, running away. And she was between life and death. She wasn't really dead.
Yeah.
She was asleep. So I feel like that was very fitting for them to have a lot of birds in this. At the very beginning, at first I thought they were doves, but they're pigeons. When she's singing in the wishing well.
Those are pigeons?
They're pigeons. You got to listen to them coo. They coo. And I looked it up, and there's white pigeons, because I thought they were doves. I was like, oh, love doves. With, the prince. No.
Because the prince kisses one.
They're pigeons. They're pigeons. But pigeons...
This movie and birds, the artistry, the artistry on the birds...
It's so jacked.
Could have been better. The crow, the raven,
my gosh,
they're doves.
So a pigeon, it's so funny, represents harmony, peace, and safety, well-being, good health, and prosperity. So in that time when she sees them, she is cleaning up, she's dreaming about love, everything is fine right then. It is peaceful. It does have harmony. She's safe because nothing is in jeopardy at that moment. So it's a good representation for them to use the pigeon / what looks like doves. When we see the evil queen's chair, it is a peacock. And when I looked up a peacock, it represents prestige and pride, is verbatim the queen.
Oh, yeah.
So very fitting. Then there is a couple incidents where they have owls in it. So there's the owl within the woods, and there is the owl carvings within the banister of the dwarf's house.
Yes.
And owls represent wisdom. And I was thinking about this. So when she's in the woods and she sees the owl, the wisdom of what's actually really supposed to be scary and what's not, because she sees the owl in the midst of her panic, and it's just kind of like realizing life isn't as harmony and peaceful as she thought. Yeah. Also, what really to be scared of or what's not to be scared of.
Yeah. Because she is absolutely petrified.
Oh, for sure.
By the woods.
And then when you see the owl sculptures or like carvings in the staircase of the dwarf's house, I feel like the dwarfs really gave her some wisdom. Like, don't invite strangers into the house, and this is not a trustworthy world that we live in, and this is how friends and family actually take care of each other and feel about each other, not like your evil mother treats you.
Yeah.
So a lot of wisdom for that. And as we know, the bluebird is very common for people to represent between Snow White and the movie. And the bluebird represents hard work.
Okay.
So she sees the bluebird while she's in the woods, and she sees them cleaning the dwarf's house. So I felt that part, especially with the cleaning and the working within the house, because that house was a hot mess, and she put a lot of work into it. Then we transfer into the crow and the raven. So like we said, we thought, and that's at where the evil queen is making her potions part of the movie. We both thought it was the crow. It looks like a crow. So a crow means a clear message, bad luck, and death. Totally could be fitting of that role.
Absolutely.
But it's in fact a raven, which also could be fitting because that's prophecy, insight, and loss or ill omen. So she's going to lose her life. She's going to die. Like crow or raven, I think they're very much interchangeable, but it does state that it is a raven, even though it looks like a crow.
Looks like a crow.
It 100% looks like a crow.
The pigeons are doves.
In the woods again, there's a quail. There's a couple quail, like a quail with the babies. Okay, quails are protectiveness.
Okay.
So that comes out in the right moment because they're trying to reassure that she's safe, that we're just animals, we're not going to hurt you. And like we mentioned before, there was the vultures. So where was the vultures again?
So the vultures were near the end.
On the mountain?
Yeah. Well, they come in when the hag gets off her boat and she's on dry land walking to the cottage overnight. She passes by the tree where there's two vultures, and they follow her to the cottage. They rest on a tree near the cottage, and when the hag leaves the cottage and runs for the mountain, they follow her. So
they represent aggressiveness.
Okay.
which by them following her
Yeah.
constantly shows that.
Yep.
Transformation, which she did transform from the evil queen to the witch, so they could be part of that. And a fearlessness of death. So they were just waiting for her to die. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like they were a good foreshadowing of what was going to happen to her.
Yes.
Because we see vultures around corpses, dead animals,
Yes.
things like that out in the wild.
Yeah, and
So
they're
when you see a vulture, you know that something's about to die.
yeah, and they specifically stayed with her. They didn't stay back.
They didn't stay with Snow White because
No.
Snow White wasn't dead, yo.
Right, right.
She was sleeping.
Yep, and when she left, when the hag left, they didn't stay behind for the dwarves. They went right on ahead and followed the old hag.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So I don't know if you've ever heard of this fan theory, but this fan theory was kind of interesting to me. The Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs are based off of cocaine and the side effects of the drugs. Have you ever heard of this fan
I have
fiction?
not.
Oh my gosh, so funny. So Snow White is another name for cocaine. It's a
Okay.
nickname for cocaine.
I've never heard that.
I did not
But
even until I started doing. We don't do cocaine, people.
I know.
I don't.
I have no
I know the
knowledge. It's
we have
white.
no reference
It's a white powder. That's all I know.
So I did research on it, and it's a nickname for cocaine. And with this theory, it says that Snow White uses cocaine, and she overdoses at the end. She doesn't just get poisoned by the way, like she's overdosed.
Oh.
And the evil stepmother is her drug dealer. She's the one that sold her the drugs that she overdoses. So the apple is
So when the prince takes her away on the horse and the sky or the capsule is in the sky,
she's
like
probably
she's
high.
dead or she's dead. If she
high.
if she OD'd, she died.
She's in going to heaven.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So I looked up the side effects based off of the Seven Dwarfs. So happy, when you're on cocaine, intense happiness.
Okay.
Grumpy, very irritable or angry at the same time when you're on cocaine. Dopey, you have the silliness because you're high. Sneezy, yeah, some people snort cocaine and they have sinus issues that come with it because they mess up their sinuses.
Some nose candy.
Mm-hmm. Bashful, when you don't have your cocaine and you're going through with withdrawals, you get depressed and you start pulling away from people. Doc is her doctor that's managing all of her symptoms when she's probably putting herself in the hospital from doing all these drugs. And then sleepy happens when you are not using cocaine. You become very sleepy because cocaine is an upper, so it makes you more awake.
Yep.
Whether this is truthful, I highly doubt it. But it is interesting. Nevertheless, it's quite funny how someone thought of this. Like, I would have never in a million years thought of this.
Yeah, no.
But it was interesting. It was a nice, fun rabbit hole to go down for a little bit. So
That's interesting.
it is. It's quite fun. There's a lot of weirdness in this movie. As much as Disney wanted it to be so sweet and innocent, people have ruined it.
Yeah, I feel like that's the way with a handful of them. I mean, if you go on and watch the honest trailers will ruin any movie, especially Disney.
All right. We have 2 quizzes.
Oh boy.
We have what % of Snow White are you? And we have what dwarf are you? I think it would be fun for us to do what dwarf you that we are. Both of us we can do it.
Okay.
And then we could do it together. Like you could put on yours and I could put on mine. And then we could put the Snow White percentage like we did with the Belle last week on our Facebook page. Sound good?
Sure.
Okay, let's look.
Send me that link.
All right.
I'm assuming you're on Pinterest.
I am. So, which of the 7 dwarfs are you? Let's play. Don't be bashful. Just jump right in. That's what it says. I'm just saying. Okay. What state of mood do you typically wake up in? Thinking about what you have to do during the day, a bit irritated, very energized, extremely groggy.
I always think about what I have to do during the day.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I'm either irritated or groggy. I am not a morning person.
That's
so
cow.
And we know. Last week, remember Cogsworth? Very similar. All right. I'm going to say a bit irritated. All right. Next question.
Which of these would annoy you the most? When you don't have all your tasks done as you planned, when you are in an unresolved conflict with a friend, when you plan to go out but the weather turns bad, or when you can't get the answers that you want.
Probably when I don't get the answers that I want. Well, I mean, I don't need it to be my way. I just want them to answer me. Is that what that means? Like if I...
For me, it's when I don't have all my tasks done as you planned.
Probably for me, unresolved conflict with. All right. Would you allow Snow White to stay at your cottage? Of course, I wouldn't mind. No, I wouldn't want it. Only if she had something to offer in return. Dun dun dun. She seems harmless enough.
I would. I mean,
I think I would too, because I mean she's so like childish.
yeah, she's so innocent. Plus, she offered to cook, clean, keep house, and make pie and more food. I mean, she made them soup, and she didn't even know them.
That's true. All right, next one.
All right. What kind of romantic partner do you consider yourself? Someone who needs their alone time, a hopeless romantic, one who is slow to open up, someone who overthinks everything. I am someone who needs their alone time.
I'm a hopeless romantic.
Well, give me my time by myself.
Hey, you're Lumiere. You should be like all smooching on people. Just saying. Down in the mines, which valuable would you go for? Gold, sapphire.
Pick a dish to serve Snow White when she visits.
I thought she was cooking for me.
That's what I thought. I mean, that was...
She can't live with me if she's not going to do
this is when she visits.
Okay,
she's
fine.
visiting. So it's like she's living...
This is when she moved away, married the prince, come back?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
So when she visits, are you going to make whatever her favorite dish is, a dessert item first, something simple but delicious, or a new recipe that you just found?
Why is there no takeout option?
Listen, Linda, just because you don't know how to cook...
I know how to cook. I don't like to cook.
You can cook like 2 things.
That is not true. I can cook at least 5. I can cook. I just don't like cooking. Okay, we're going to go simple but delicious. She's going to get some goulash or chili or something like that. If she likes it.
I don't know.
Oh, come on. You're going to cook something fancy-smancy, like something new, whatever. What's the other option?
No, you never try a new dessert on people that are visiting. Listen, that happened on me, and I ended up eating oyster stuffing, and it was the most disgusting thing ever. Because they didn't try it first. It was gross.
Yeah, it sounds gross.
I might do a dessert, though. Like, I'm pretty known for my desserts.
True. You are mostly blank around your friends. Uninhibited, open, and emotional, the organizer, or the reserved.
Wow, that depends on the day of the week.
And your friend.
Yeah, the group of friends, yeah.
I'm going to say open and emotional.
Nope.
Oh, well, we know that's not you. I'm just saying that's mine.
That's definitely you. It depends. Sometimes I'm reserved.
What are the 2 options that you're hemming and hawing over?
But I'm also the organizer, depending on the group.
I'm going to say reserved. At first, you're always reserved.
Okay. What do you typically base your big decisions off of? How the decision would affect your status with wealth, location, etc. How it would impact your well-being. How the decision would...
Genres are types of different books. So, like, I'm just saying, you don't read. Don't look at me like that.
Well, I know what a genre is.
Okay.
I listen to music.
Books. You ready for books?
No.
Oh. Science fiction and fantasy. General fiction, realistic fiction. Thriller or mystery. Romance and drama.
None of the above. Titanic is not on here. Listen.
Oh, Titanic would be a romance and a drama.
No, I'm talking about like, not Titanic the movie, like Titanic, the factual nonfiction book.
You want
I like
okay.
nonfiction, real historical facts, not any of this.
So
I guess I would go more realistic fiction then.
that's what I was going to say for you. Mine is going to be more science fiction and fantasy.
No.
Which is surprising because you love Harry Potter. You make no sense to me.
I like listening to stuff like that, but if I'm going to read it, no.
You want the facts. Got it.
Because it holds my attention.
We all know that's not where I go, but okay.
Unless it's in movie form. If it's in movie form, then yeah.
Like, I love historical fiction because it's facts, but it's interesting still. Like, there's like a twist and turn plot kind of thing happening.
But I can't read it. Put it in movie form. How about audiobook? Does that count?
I will count audiobook because that is the closest we're going to get you. The closest I'm going to get.
Oh, you consider something or a task a success when you gain some knowledge doing it. It leads to changes being made, big or small. You feel good about it. It is fully completed.
It's fully completed.
It's fully completed.
Choose a Disney princess to be your sidekick. Belle, Snow White, Jasmine, or Mulan. Oh.
I kind of want to say Mulan.
I was going to say that too because she can whoop anybody.
She's a badass.
But
Sorry, she is a badass.
I'm like, let's see, who can defend me? Well, Snow White's going to be poisoned before anything happens. She's going to die. She's going to be not...
She's gullible.
She's naive and dumb.
Yeah, well, she's young. She has no life experience.
I know. She's only
But Jasmine
14,
has a tiger,
but-
though. Do I gain a tiger? Because that tiger's pretty smart.
You love your tigers.
I do love my tigers.
I love Belle because she got all her books. Are we going to use
I
our
know.
friends for what they can give us? Yes, we will.
Books and tigers. I feel like I
Mm.
would choose Mulan, though, because, like...
Oh, this is so
if
hard.
I get in trouble, though, I know...
Because we got to think, it's a sidekick. Sidekick, you want someone that can be there to save your butt when you need it.
Which is Mulan.
Which is going to be Mulan.
I'm going to choose Mulan.
Me too.
I love Jasmine, but I'm
I love
sorry.
you, Belle, but we got to go to Mulan. All right. How often do you find yourself in an argument or a disagreement? Very rarely, often, once or twice a month, a day or two a week.
Is this an argument with myself?
It says find yourself in an argument or a disagreement. I'm going to say once or twice a month.
Yeah.
I feel like rarely is too broad. Like, is that once a year? I don't know.
The most important characteristic of these is loyalty, intelligent,
Sorry.
humor, or honesty. I'm going to say loyalty.
That does not shock me.
Yeah, there's plenty of people that learn the hard way. Psst, Courtney. Tom Courtney. I'll have to edit that out.
Yeah, we know. I'm torn between honesty and loyalty. I'm gonna go honesty. I feel like if you're honest, you're loyal. Like, I feel like there's some
Not
similarities.
necessarily. There is, but I mean,
I don't think they're like interchangeable completely, but I feel like if I'm honest, like, I'm gonna be true to my feelings. I'm gonna be true to the people that I care about. Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. Because you can be loyal, but you could also be lying to people. I don't know. I'd rather be honest, I guess. Out of these, you wish you could learn. a useful but practical skill you don't already have, a foreign language, how to cook new foods, a musical instrument. I know I'm going to shock you. It's not going to be how to cook new foods.
I got that skill.
I don't want that skill.
I can also play a musical instrument.
I want to learn to do foreign language.
I'm going to do a useful but practical skill that I don't already have.
I want to learn Japanese.
Nope.
Yep. It's going to happen.
Which of these places would you love to visit? Germany, Japan, Hawaii, Ireland.
Oh, Japan and Ireland. I want you both. But
Germany.
I'm going to go Japan.
Oh, I got Germany.
What advice would you like to pass on to future generations? The earlier you can get everything in order, the easier it is for you later. Always be open to new cultures and ideals. Life is short. Try to live with no regrets, or listen to everyone's side of the story before you judge them.
These are all really good.
I know. How about all of the above?
Yep. I feel like life is short. That's something that you're either going to understand or you're not. Like, I feel like you could tell some people that till they're blue in the face and they're just going to be like, listen, I am, and they're not. Mama Sue.
I'm thinking I'm heading more towards listen to everyone's side of the story before you judge them. I feel like that's could be very close to also being open to new cultures and ideals, because you have to listen to that new culture, that new ideal.
You have to understand it. Like, with today's world, the problem with a lot of the problem with today is people don't understand either other cultures or how culture was back in the day.
Yeah.
Because culture changes everywhere.
Of course. I just feel like, for me, people need to give other people a chance. Like, I think people feel like this is what I believe in, and they don't listen at the other side, and they just force their side onto other people without fully understanding where the other person's
I'm going to do the
from.
cultures. All right. What would be your chore as one of the Seven Dwarfs? Cooking meals, waking everyone up for the day, the leader, the medic. Cooking meals, obviously.
I'll be the leader. Tell other people to do the cooking. Among your other 6 companions, you could be known as the impulsive one, the sensible one, the peaceful one, or the organized one.
Wow. I can nick one out.
Which one are you nicking one out?
The peaceful one.
That's the one I was going to pick for me.
I am definitely not the peaceful one.
I feel like I am.
But I feel like I'm also not, I'm impulsive, but not that impulsive.
I do too. I feel like I'm more impulsive than some people that I know, but I also am not cautious, but just more logical about what I'm going to do beforehand.
I feel like I know when to be impulsive. Like
sensible. I guess
obviously, when at a flea market and you see a cat impulse buy, that makes sense, right?
It was $10. I turned around for 2 seconds. Boom. All of a sudden, she's got a cat in her hands.
But she's the sweetest little kitty.
She's very cute.
I love her.
All right. I'm going to say the peaceful one because I feel like I'm always...
I also feel like I'm organized.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't do organized for the last one that you wanted to do organized for, so...
Oh, that is true.
All right. There is an unexpected visitor standing outside the cottage door. What do you do? Well, apparently if it's Snow White, we're just going to let her live with us.
Oh.
Open the door. They might need something. Open the door slightly and ask what they need. Do not open the door. You aren't expecting anyone. Ask who is there through the closed door.
I normally open the door slightly and ask what they need. I'm going to do that because that's my norm.
I would not open the door if I'm not expecting anyone. They're just going to go away eventually. That's what I do for most things. They'll just go away.
It's your off day. What do you choose to do? You go for a walk in the woods, sleep in, dream a little longer, read a book, get some unfinished chores done before relaxing.
I would like to go for a walk in the woods.
What's the weather like?
Is that why you're deciding whether you're going to be walking through the woods or not?
Or doing chores, yeah.
I don't know. This is not a quiz for the weather. Just pick one. I already know who I'm at.
Well, if my chores are already unfinished, then I'm just going to walk around in the woods because I'm already late on doing chores.
All right. You ready?
Sure.
Okay. I am bashful.
I am Doc.
So it says, you would be bashful of the Seven Dwarfs, the one who develops a little bit of a crush on Snow White when he first meets her. You are someone whose emotions dictate a lot of what you do. That's not a bad thing, as you are also the one who is often most open and receptive to others' emotions and ideas. You also might not be the type of person who lets their emotions show right away. You might hide your blushes behind your long white beard, as Bashful does. But after a little bit of time, it becomes more evident to those around you. Creativity and imagination are also very important to you in some capacity or another. Whether you would love to be sleeping in to finish your dreams or daydreaming during the day to escape, you might often find yourself having a few lofty goals for your life. Not to worry, though, with your passion and dedication, you can achieve even your wildest of dreams.
Okay.
All right, Doc, what's up?
You would be Doc of the Seven Dwarfs, the self-proclaimed leader of the group, much to Grumpy's dismay at times. Doc is, and you are, someone who likes to keep things organized and running smoothly. Though he may not have everything at 100% all the time, he tries his best to make sure everyone has something to do. You would be the type of person to let Snow White in and warn her not to let anyone else enter the cottage, as Doc does. Grumpy does that.
I know, I was just going to say they were inaccurate in that statement.
No, because that's Grumpy. And someone who sets the rest of the rules. In a dire or pressure-filled situation, you might panic slightly that things aren't going your way, but not to worry. Your fellow companions will be there to support and cheer you on until you decide to take the reins once again.
Awesome. All right.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to like, comment,
And subscribe.
and
Don't
subscribe.
forget to click that notification bell so you get notified every time we post on YouTube.
Absolutely. And if you want to learn how to receive some more content, maybe some blooper reels, some merch, take place in a poll that we will be holding here soon, go ahead and check out our Patreon at Beauties in the Podcast.
You can